Such a militant, aggressive direction as my opponent proposes is not the direction that the LGBT movement should take. While I agree that embracing queer identities is important, embracing slurs, as my opponent suggests, is an entirely different subject. My opponent proposes that the reclamation of the word queer could be seen as similar to reclaiming other slurs, but I don't agree. Some words have extremely painful and violent histories that are difficult to overcome, and some words are more controversial than others. The word queer has taken on a different connotation and is almost universally regarded as a positive word now. Queer is also a word that any person who is a gender or sexual minority has a right to identify with, although they are also welcome to reject it. The slurs that my opponent suggests the LGBT movement reclaim, however, have very specific histories and cannot be universalized. Faggot refers mainly to gay men, dyke refers mainly to gay women, and tranny refers mainly to trans feminine people. While I am not suggesting that such slurs cannot be reclaimed, the act of reclaiming a slur is an intensely personal decision. Thus, I maintain that the term manifest faggotry is divisive and exclusionary. My opponent stresses several times that the fight for marriage equality should be militant, and that the LGBT community should wage war with heteronormative society. My opponent also claims that by forcing society to accept LGBT people, the LGBT movement will achieve education. I disagree. First of all, by aggressively disrupting normative society, the LGBT movement will only receive hostility, not understanding. The LGBT community has events such as pride celebrations for bringing their causes to people's attention and making their presence loudly known. However, not every issue should be fought for in this manner. In 2009, Gallup did a study which showed that cooperative and positive interaction between LGBT and non-LGBT people reduces sentiments of prejudice. The LGBT community will get more done by working cooperatively with non-LGBT people instead of militantly opposing them. My opponent mentions briefly that the acceptance of LGBT families will help end bullying, but I can't help but think that focusing on same-sex marriage is exclusionary to LGBT youth. Marriage does not pertain to LGBT youth or even to all adult LGBT people, whereas all LGBT people need income to sustain their lives, hence my argument that non-discrimination policies are more pressing than same-sex marriage, along with anti-bullying policies. Job discrimination is a huge issue facing LGBT people. According to American Progress, anywhere between 14 to 43% of LGBT people are discriminated against in the workplace because of their identities. Looking only at transgender people, that number rises to 90%. 20% of transgender people have been homeless at some point in their lives. Transgender people need places to live and sources of income before they worry about getting married. Also, in order to end bullying, we need more education. Same-sex marriage does not directly address this issue. Even within the community, there is not much education on certain issues. For example, my opponent consistently referred to me with female pronouns, assuming that I identify as female, when I actually prefer third-gender pronouns thee and zir. While this is an easy detail to overlook, it only serves to show that there needs to be far more education, especially about gender identity. Same-sex marriage may force heteronormative society to accept LGB families, but will do very little for education about the transgender community. Same-sex marriage does grant LGBT people certain rights, but as a tool to bring cultural change, it is problematic and should not be the priority of the LGBT movement. Other policies, such as job discrimination and anti-bullying acts, will serve the LGBT community far better.